A long, long time ago in Mexico, there lived a young girl called Maria. Now Maria was very, very poor. She lived with her father, and her father looked everywhere for work but could never find any. They were on the point of almost starving when finally he found a job. But the job was out to sea, and he would have to go away for at least 3 months. Maria was only little at the time, so she had to go and stay with her grandmother in the mountains. She took a bus all the way up the winding roads into the mountains, and when the bus could go no further, she got off the bus and a man was there with a donkey, and she took the donkey further and further, deeper and deeper into the mountains, miles and miles away from where she had grown up in the city. And finally, when the sun was almost coming down, she reached the village, and there everyone had come to greet her. "Maria," they said, "we have waited so long to see you. Don't you look like your mother?" And she was told lots of stories about her mother who she'd never met. And they took her to their house and they gave her a huge feast. Now before she had come, Maria had gone into town with her father, because in Mexico you must buy a gift when you visit someone's house. And she'd scrimped and saved, and they'd brought all their money together, and they'd found gifts for every single one of her members of family. So she gave gifts to her grandmother, to her aunts, to her uncles, to her cousins, and everyone was very delighted with their gifts, even though they were only small, meagre things. Now it was December, and it was nearly time for Christmas. And just before Christmas Eve, Maria's grandmother turned to her and said, "Maria, so what wonderful gift did you bring for the baby Jesus on Christmas Eve?" And Maria looked at her grandmother blankly. "A gift? I don't have a gift for the baby Jesus." "Oh," said her grandmother, "oh, don't you give gifts to the baby Jesus in the city?" And they didn't. Maria had never heard of such a thing. "Well," said her grandmother, "never mind. I'm sure no one will mind. They'll know that you're from out of town. It doesn't matter." But it mattered to Maria. She desperately didn't want to be out of place, and she wanted to give something to the baby Jesus if that's what everyone else was going to do. So she went out into the meadows and she looked for flowers. She searched and she hunted everywhere. But all the flowers had been picked. It was Christmas. People wanted to put them on their tables for dinner. And she couldn't find any anywhere. Now eventually she thought to herself, well, the baby Jesus knows it's the thought that counts. So she picked with care the thickest, greenest weeds she could find. They were only weeds, but maybe he wouldn't mind. And she took them back to her grandmother. And her grandmother looked at them. "Oh dear, is that all you could find?" And Maria nodded sadly. "Well, dear, we'll do our best." And her grandmother got out a big, beautiful scarf, and she wrapped the weeds in the scarf. And then Maria and her grandmother went to church on Christmas Eve. And when they got there, everybody had gifts for the baby Jesus. Milk, honey, flowers, whatever they could find. They were poor, but they wanted to give something. And finally, after everyone had gone up and given their gifts, it was Maria's turn. She picked up her bundle. Wrapped in her grandmother's scarf, she held the weeds close and hoped nobody would look or notice that she was only giving weeds to the baby Jesus. Now as Maria walked down the aisle, everyone was whispering, "What wonderful flowers she must have bought, wrapped in that lovely scarf. Oh, I bet they're lovely." When Maria finally got to the altar, she placed the flowers on the altar in front of the baby Jesus. And there was a man next to her. And he bent over and he said, "Show everyone the lovely flowers you bought, Maria, for the baby Jesus." And he whipped away the scarf. And when he did, everyone gasped, because they were the most beautiful, red, star-shaped Christmas flowers you could imagine. Maria knew it was a miracle of the baby Jesus, because he knew in her heart she was giving a gift of great beauty. And this was it. And we call this the poinsettia. But in Mexico, they call it Noche Buena, Christmas Eve.